Gaslighting in the workplace. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Gaslighting is a word that's being used more regularly these days, albeit often incorrectly. Many people roll it out when they believe that somebody isn't telling them the truth of something. That isn't gaslighting. They believe that when somebody put forward a contrary view, that is gaslighting. It isn't. Gaslighting is a specific manipulation that is utilized, invariably by narcissists, to enable somebody to end up doubting their reality. It isn't just about telling somebody a lie, although that is a proponent of it. It is a repeated course of actions which are engaged in, which result in the victim doubting their own reality. Many of you will know that it comes from a film called Gaslighting, where a husband would turn down the gas lamps when his wife wasn't looking, causing her to doubt her reality as to the level at which they had been set. Gaslighting is done by a narcissist, consciously by aware narcissists and subconsciously by unaware narcissists, as a part of a manipulation over the victim. It's done because the narcissist has their reality in which they operate, and the narcissism causes them to need to assert control and draw fuel from that victim. And thus, when the victim challenges the narcissist on something they've said or done, the narcissist denies it, resulting in the victim wondering if they're the one that has got it wrong. The narcissist maintains the denial with such conviction, with such a steadfast dedication, that the victim wonders if they're the one that has actually got it wrong. This, for example, happens because the narcissism must defend the narcissist against the suggestion that is being made by the victim, which threatens the narcissist's need for control. And thus, the narcissism causes the narcissist to issue a denial, which invariably contradicts the understanding of reality that the victim has. So, for example, the victim may innocently say to the narcissist, "Oh, did you remember to purchase the oranges?" The narcissist hasn't done so because they've simply forgotten, or that they were focused on doing something else, that they had no sense of obligation to purchase the oranges. The suggestion that they ought to have done so is a threat to their control. So immediately the narcissist will say, "No, I haven't." The victim will probably say, "Oh, for goodness sake, I asked you to do that this morning." The suggestion that the narcissist has forgotten to purchase the oranges when they were told to do so is a threat to control. Accordingly, the narcissist will then say, "You didn't ask me this morning," as a means to nullify the threat to control. The victim says, I did." Narcissist shakes her head and said, "You didn't say anything to me about oranges. You said something about how you needed to put a laundry wash on and you wished me a good day, and you asked what we were going to have for dinner tonight, but you didn't ask me to get any oranges." "No, I'm sure I did," says the victim, starting to doubt themselves. No, you didn't. I'd have remembered if you had. Do you not think I would have gone and bought them if you'd have asked me to do it?" That sounds plausible, doesn't it? If you told me, I would have got them. The fact that I haven't got them perhaps suggests that you didn't actually tell me that that was what was required. And thus, the victim starts to doubt whether they were right. But that's just one instance. And it happens repeatedly, so that it causes that victim to start to doubt their reality. It often takes place within the realm of a denial. "That didn't happen. You're misremembering it. I never said that." But it can also be where the narcissist will start to change things in order to affect the recollection and memory of that victim. So, for instance, possibly removing something from a calendar, taking an object where it's normally to be found and putting it elsewhere. And then when the victim says, have you seen my car keys, for example, they'll say, well, they're there where they always are. And the victim, of course, has been unlocked and they're not in the usual place. And then the narcissist will collect the keys, put them back in the usual place. And when the narcissist then shows the victim to that usual place and says, look, there are your keys. And the victim goes, they weren't there before. And the narcissist says, they've always been there. Why wouldn't they be there? You're misremembering things again. Your memory's failing. And thus it's those behaviours done repeatedly which undermine the recollection and memory and conviction of the victim, which make them easier to control, easier to get fuel from, and of course, to then shift the blame onto them. This gaslighting occurs in intimate relationships between narcissist and victim. It can also happen in a familial one, and it can also happen in a work environment. And I have an example for you that was taken from a post on Reddit where someone was wondering what they could do about the following scenario. Now, the scenario doesn't mention anything about narcissism. They thought that actually they'd been trolled. But in actual fact, it's quite clear they've been dealing with a narcissist, although they don't realise. The person wrote as follows. I work in a medium-sized firm. Between 2014 and January 2024, I found myself constantly making mistakes while working. Some examples are, my calculations on Microsoft Excel were wrong. Data inputs on spreadsheets were wrong. I was booking the wrong days with my annual leave by accident. For instance, I booked 1st to the 10th of October, but suddenly found I had booked 3rd to the 13th of October, which then impacted on the business negatively. I noticed that there were typos in documents that I had sent. Counts became cunts. I felt like I was going crazy. So I would do things like screenshot what I'd calculated, but then I found that my screenshots had disappeared when I logged in the next day. So then I started to wonder if I'd ever taken them in the first place. This individual is showing the symptoms of gaslighting, feeling like they're going crazy, taking steps to try and remedy that, but then doubting whether they'd done the thing in the very first place. The individual goes on to write, in February of 2024, our IT guy left after facing a disciplinary and we hired somebody else. The new IT guy, over the next 2 weeks, approached me and showed me a series of records. The former IT guy had been accessing my system, editing my work, and changing the information I had put into my annual leave sheet, among other things. This man had been sabotaging my work life for a decade. Now, what this individual doesn't realise is that they were being manipulated by a narcissist who was wanting to assert control over them, wanting to draw a response by virtue of what was being done, and also evidently revelling in the misfortune that this person was experiencing as a consequence of these manipulations. The fact that this had been done repeatedly over the course of a decade, it wasn't a one-off or a small series of instances which might have perhaps been occasioned by an external stressor reducing emotional empathy, but the fact that this person had acted with a sense of entitlement, an absence of emotional empathy, a lack of accountability, had acted with grandiosity and had been manipulative again and again and again for 10 years, demonstrates systemic behaviour over a sustained period of time commensurate with the behaviour of a narcissist. The victim went on to explain that various consequences arose from all of this. They weren't allowed to work from home like their colleagues as a consequence of their apparent unreliability, which increased their transport costs. They've been overlooked for promotion. They've had their professional life and credibility massively damaged. This person underwent assessments for ADHD and early onset Alzheimer's and other cognitive tests with the National Health Service. They were put on a performance improvement plan. The old former IT person apparently has moved out of the United Kingdom, but this person wonders, is there anything they can do? They've spoken with HR and they issued an apology. They've been allowed to work from home again and they've removed their performance improvement plan. But they've asked what's the position about all the money they lost travelling into work for years. What about the stress of the assessments? What about the years that he made her think that he was absent-minded or crazy or just even stupid? Now, it's not for me to address the legality of the situation in terms of whether a claim could be made against the person that had done this, and if they were able to be found and if they had the means of paying it, or whether a claim could be made against the employer for being vicariously liable for the acts and omissions of the rogue employee. That is a separate matter. But what you have here is a very clear example of gaslighting that's taking place in the workplace. That a narcissist, in order to assert control and draw fuel from this person, was sabotaging their work, making them believe they were going crazy by deliberately removing aspects of that person's work, and then even removing the screenshots when she was attempting to get to the bottom of what was going on. This is gaslighting, a sustained and repeated course of behaviours put in place to cause somebody to doubt their reality, which then enables that individual to assert control over that person and to draw fuel by way of their responses. Much of it will have been thought fuel, because it's likely that the individual affected was not contacting IT directly and saying, I've got these problems, my work's going wrong. But the knowledge that they had of the impact that they were causing on this individual will have provided a degree of thought fuel. Furthermore, the individual may well have spoken to other people about what they were doing to that person and received a reaction also, which again would provide fuel. But the major reason it was done was to assert control over this person, to interfere with their lives, to cause them to doubt their reality and cause them difficulties, and is a clear example of gaslighting in the workplace. Where you experience such difficulties, it may well be the case that you're dealing with a narcissist, and therefore you need to consider what steps you can take. I have an excellent assistance package called How to Handle a Narcissist in the Workplace, which sets out many practical steps that you can take when you're dealing with a narcissist, whether it's a co-worker, whether it's a boss, whether it's an underling. I detail the various different scenarios that you find yourself in, and you can obtain that from the Knowledge Vault, link in the video description. Alternatively, or in addition, you can speak to me by way of audio consultation, as I have done so with thousands of people who found themselves in difficult situations dealing with a workplace narcissist, so I can provide you with the practical observations and assistance to gain an appropriate resolution for yourself. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.